welcome to another episode of Between the Post. This is Tyler Vaughan, your host, and we have on a phenomenal guest, John DeBenedictus. John, did I pronounce your name correctly? Because we probably didn't go over that like we should have.
No, that was perfect.
There you go, I tell you what. So I feel like every time I have a guest on, I always say, hey, did I pronounce your name correctly? Which that might be a reflection of me. I'm not quite sure, so we'll just hopefully move past that. But anyways, we're so happy to have you on. I think that anytime I have some excitement in my voice, which I hope is always the case. But anytime I have another goalkeeper on, I feel a little bit safer as it relates to talking to someone about the different topics we're going to tackle today. So one of the things that I think we need to dive into, obviously, is, John, your background. I really want to make sure that we tackle kind of who you are, and what you bring to the table. So John comes to us, and he has probably over 40 years of experience. Did I do my math right, John, or should I have rounded down, rounded up? What do we have there?
Yeah.
40 years, roughly?
I just calculated it myself. 45.
Yeah, 40. So I'm going to do you a favor. We're going to round down. We'll cut out 45. But no, I mean, I think that's relevant, and you're coming to us with such great experience, and I think that at such a great time as it relates to the sport, I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to look at the overall perspective of soccer in North America. You are from Canada, and we love that. And I think that perspective and bringing that in is brilliant, and I love it. So I think that this is one of those days that when we get on the podcast, we get on the episodes here, and I spend a conversation with you, I think that I'm very much looking forward to it. Being a fellow goalkeeper, I know that no matter what, you're going to see things my way, and I'm going to see things your way, which is always great because I don't have to question you as much. So I think that this is such a wonderful time to spend together, and I'm very excited for this. I want you to make sure you have some time to introduce yourself, but I will set things up so that everyone kind of listening understands that we're going to tackle the last 9 seconds. In the last 9 seconds, you can dive into this, but I want to make sure that I set it up for you. The last 9 seconds is a book that you've put together that basically categorizes, and I love the biggest thing that I love about this is that you're coming at this from the perspective of a goalkeeper. And a lot of people question that, why would the perspective of a goalkeeper from an attacking standpoint be relevant? But those of us that are attackers and that have been shut down by fine goalkeepers like yourself and myself, probably more you than me, but anyways, I think that's a wonderful opportunity. We goalkeepers, we see the field in a different light than I think many others, and you have basically tied all that in and created the last 9 seconds, and I want you to obviously dig into that in this particular episode and introduce yourself. But I tell you what, this is I'm looking forward to this, and I'm super excited about kind of hearing more about the last 9 seconds and what our listeners can take from this time together.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm so excited to talk to you about the book and some of my experiences, and hopefully it'll be a good hour or whatever that we're going to spend. Yeah,
well, John, there are probably billions of people, if I'm being modest here, that listen to this podcast. So I tell you what, but no, I mean, in serious nature, I've said so many times that the whole reason we do this is that hopefully we have, and it's humbling the amount of listeners that's growing with this particular podcast. But, our whole goal in doing this is that if we impact one coach, one parent, one player, that they in turn somewhere down the road are impacting a team of players, and therefore potentially the next generation of coaches or parents. So I'd love to hear kind of, obviously want you to have the opportunity to introduce yourself, to kind of give a little bit of your background and why you're way more qualified than I am to be on this particular podcast.
Well, first of all, let me say that I've been coaching for a long time, and I started coaching while I was still playing competitive soccer at teenage years and through university. But at that time, I'd already started coaching at the same time, and I actually started, I guess it was 10 years old, just playing house league, as they call it up here in Canada. I think it's called recreational down there, and and I was a bit discouraged after a year with the coach who wouldn't do much, so I quit. And then, but I'd still play in the schoolyards, and I always put myself in goal. And so I had a friend say, John, we need a goalie for our team. And at 15, that's when I started playing goal. From there, I played on the worst team, and you probably can relate, but when you're playing on a team that's not very good, the goalkeeper's getting a lot of shots, a lot of crosses, a lot of breakaways they have to stop, and also a lot of eyes. So, I might have let in 10 goals or 12 goals, but if I stopped 40, because the defense wasn't good. So I got picked for all-star teams, and even though I had a poor goals against average. And as it turned out, I ended up playing university ball, and we won the national championship with York University. And from there, I got scouted to go play here in the southern Ontario, upper New York State, and parts of Quebec. Used to be a league called the National Soccer League, which was a pro league, which was one step below the North American Soccer League. And I played as a goalkeeper there for a few years. But basically, that league, they had players that came over from Europe because the players in those days didn't get paid like they do today.
Right.
If you're playing First Division Portugal or Second Division Italy, or even in Scotland, you needed that extra summer job, I guess, to make ends meet. So we had a lot of great players play in the National Soccer League, and they had great crowds in those days because there wasn't much soccer on television. So if you came over from Germany or from Portugal or Italy, you'd follow your team. So there'd be a Toronto Italia or Toronto Ukrania or Toronto Portuguese or St. Catharines, Roma. These are cities in and around the Toronto, Southern Ontario area. And so the community would go watch their team from their hometown kind of thing. And so we'd get, great crowds. I think when the top two teams played, get 25,000. Now our team, which was not as good, we'd average 1,500, but we went to play against some of the teams with huge followings, get huge crowds. And, I feel sad in a way for some of the kids who aren't experiencing that here in North America, unless you're playing for MLS. But certainly down there, we're seeing some great crowds in USL and some of the lower divisions. So I think it's great for kids coming up. But through all this, I'm coaching, and I'm at the same time goalkeeping, and I graduated with Bachelor of Science with physical education major. So I took a lot of, obviously, all the biomechanics, kinesiology, the psychology, sports psychology, and obviously used it as I coached.
Right.
So that's kind of the background. So I played now I wasn't paid big dollars because as a local, they saved all the money for the imports. There's no one made all the money.
it doesn't pay to be a homegrown kid, huh?
No, so the Canadian boys we didn't get paid nowhere near as much. In fact, if we lost, I don't think we got paid anything.
Yeah. Oh man. And as a goalkeeper, that's the 10 people in front of you's fault, isn't that right? Do I have that wrong?
Yeah, that's we're going to stick by that.
That's only two goalkeepers' opinion, so we'll just stick with that.
Yeah. So while I was coaching, my team, I would say by the time they became 18 years old, I always like to say we were the second best team in North America at the time, and usually, traditionally, when Canadian teams went to U.S. tournaments, we'd come back and win the championship. And way back in '86, last time Canada was in the World Cup, U.S. didn't qualify. And since 1990, except for just this recent World Cup, the U.S. has surpassed Canada in player development and certainly in attendance and NCAA's. Their leagues have been quite good, the quality of players. So we can no longer go down and play in a tournament in the U.S. and come back with a victory. So things have changed for the good in the U.S. and now we're in a catch-up mode here in Canada.
Right.
But we had, I had the top scorer in the league at the time, and I had 6 players who were training with the old Toronto Blizzard of the North American Soccer League. And in '84, one of those was going to be the first round draft pick of the Toronto Blizzard. Well, the winter of '84, the whole North American Soccer League folded, and for the most part, dreams were shattered. For players, coaches, because a lot of jobs disappeared.
Right.
And so that was a depressing time for soccer, and certainly for the player that I had worked with since he was 14, and he became leading scorer in the National Soccer League minor division, they called it back then. And, having a player first round pick would have been great for a coach's career. It's the old push-pull mechanism in sports sociology, where your coach pushes a player to move further ahead, and then the player gets there and pulls the coach up with him.
That's right. I've been waiting for that. I don't know. It's not quite happened for me yet, to be honest with you. But
well, there was nothing to pull up because everything had crashed.
Yeah. So you're talking about the NASL, huh? You're talking about the crash of the NASL. Yeah. Yep.
And they're having a 50-year reunion in Dallas, I believe. I believe it's sometime in October of 2018. A big reunion going on down there. So after that point in time, there wasn't much going on, and as following Canadian soccer, I was very disappointed that Canada did not qualify for the World Cup. I believe it was '98, and at that point, we had missed a certain amount of chances in terms of scoring chances that I thought, had we scored that 1 or 2 extra goal, we would have maybe won or qualified for the World Cup. And it really bothered me that as I started watching games, more and more players would miss. Players with talent, they can kick a ball, head a ball. They had some fire in their belly and they could challenge for balls. But when it came for that split second to make a decision on what to do to score a goal, too many players would make the wrong decision that don't result in goals. So I said to myself, how can I train somebody, a player, it's not going to take 5 years to change their mindset? And that's where I came up with my course. I call it my Golden Goal Scoring course, which the book is based on. The book's called The Last 9 Seconds. I was going to call it The Secrets of Scoring Goals on the Last Touch, which is now a subtitle. I call it The Last 9 Seconds because I'm working on the mind of the player, what's going on in their brain, 9 seconds or less before that split second needed to score the goal, which is really the last touch.
Right.
Time they touch the ball before it hits the back of the net. And so that's why I call it The Last 9 Seconds. I thought it'd be catchy. But the reality is I call it The Secrets of Scoring Goals on the Last Touch. And so I started working, doing I watched thousands of goals, and I started to chart a whole bunch of different things to see if there's any way I could use the statistics from what I assumed were going to be correct based on years of playing goal.
Right.
To see how maybe those statistics and tendencies would help me put a program together where I can chop a player's player development to score goals, which might take 5-6 years, and just change your mindset in 3 or 4 days and see if it'll improve. So after I did the years of studying and watching games and I was also quite into perception.
Right.
At university, a couple of courses, which is an offshoot of psychology, on perception. And I had a professor, Dr. Ian Howard, who actually passed away not too long ago. He wrote a number of books, and he was my professor. And he also worked for NASA. And he did some, his courses were amazing. And I really think that helped me put together, what the eyes see, the sensory, different senses that we have to try and predict what might or might not happen and why we make mistakes. So quite often it's tied into perception and motor muscular perception, how the whole mind works, the eyes, and what you think is going on and maybe what's really happening. But I think players are making mistakes. And you were a goalkeeper. How many times would you say that a player should have scored on you but made a mistake in their decision-making process?
Well, my goalkeeping confidence comes out and says every time that I made a save. But I think a lot of the times that we as goalkeepers come out and we don't close them down the right way. I think that those are opportunities that attackers have to beat us, right? And I think that probably from my experience, that was probably quite a lot, quite often. So I'd say, I don't know, I'd probably say 50% or less. I don't know, in those instances where it's a 1v1 situation where it's kind of up to the attacker to capitalize on the opportunity.
Right. Because really, we don't have much say in it, do we?
That goal is always going to be a lot bigger than I am. So, I mean, I think that obviously, you and I spend all these hours and all these days trying to train the next generation of goalkeepers. And I think that we leave out that part that it says, hey, turn and look at the goal. It's always going to be bigger than you, right? And it's how do you cope with the fact that that's the case. So no, I agree. I mean, it's the world against you kind of a situation to be in the feet of a goalkeeper.
Right, and players maybe who missed the net, let's say, or should have done better in the position that they were on in the field, and then you're kind of saying, oh, thank God he missed the net, or he didn't put it where I was weak at.
Right.
Quite often I always say sometimes the goalie's best saves are the saves they don't need to make.
Right,
but
right, yeah.
Maybe they've gotten into a position that's thrown the attacker off, and therefore he shoots it right at you or misses the goal or whatever. And reality is maybe that if they would have made a better decision, they would have probably scored, because it is a big net. It's not easy to stop. So you're probably wondering, why, as a goalkeeper, am I, working on trying to make us look bad by giving advice to strikers?
That's why we got on the phone, is because I was very curious as to figure out why you're hurting my kind.
Right, and I guess the reality is that from our own national team who didn't advance, I figured maybe I could help them. And also, the biggest complaint, we had a broadcaster here in Toronto, and we still have a number of them who are on television or radio, who continuously complain about the game and don't talk about it as much as they should in terms of, in relation to the amount of fans that we're getting. Here in Toronto, we're getting great crowds for our MLS team. We won the championship last year.
You don't have a bad team up there, do you?
No, this year we're struggling, but we got to within penalty shots of winning the Champions League.
Yeah.
And the broadcasters are still talking about basketball while the season's over, hockey, football. In the middle of summer when nothing else is going on, they're barely talking about soccer, and they always complain that it's a boring game to watch. Well, you and I know that a 0-0 game, 1-1 game can be just as exciting as the 3-3 game. But if some of the players who have chances to score and maybe should have scored do score, maybe because I can help them, then maybe we can turn a 0-0 game or a 1-0 game into a 3-3 game, and all of a sudden all the critics of the game, especially in the media, would maybe shut up and talk about soccer.
Yeah.
Just this last week we had a phenomenal game here in Toronto where Ibrahimovic came to Toronto, and they packed the stadium. It was standing room only, and it was a 5-3 game. Tell you what, everybody went home happy. First of all, Toronto won.
Right.
Ibro scored an incredible goal. I don't know if you've seen it. And there's 8 goals. So, I think that we need more goals to help promote our own game, especially in North America.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and I think that anytime. I mean, that's the thing with the MLS specifically, as you're kind of alluding to. It's we have all of these players. Rooney just came over, but you have Ibrahimovic who's come over, and I think that it makes the game of soccer a little bit more fun. And I mean, the game you're talking about, right? I mean, I don't know that most Americans would pull for LA Galaxy in this particular instance, but obviously most international soccer fans might potentially pull for the Galaxy from the Ibrahimovic standpoint. But Toronto crushes them, right? 5-3. But that's an exciting game, and I think that you're bringing. I mean, the first goal was scored 4 or 5 minutes into the game, if I'm not mistaken, right? And then Josie Altidore scores a little bit later, and I mean, it's just. From the first whistle to the last, it's game on. I mean, the last goal was scored. I think I'd seen the highlights of this game after in stoppage time, right? Toronto scored.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
all the big name players scored.
Yeah.
Ibro, Altidore, Javinko, and Vasquez for Toronto. So
yeah.
But the one thing that I noticed about that game was Ibrahimovic scored. The Toronto crowd pretty much gave him a standing ovation.
Yeah.
I don't know if he experienced that on television, but certainly when I was at the field, that just shows you that we have a much more educated crowd than we've had in the past, and that's great because when you have a crowd that knows the game and appreciates some of the talent, that's just going to help our game grow. And I'm excited for the future, with the World Cup coming back in
that's right.
8 years in North America. It's a great time.
Yeah. I think that we're at a position, especially in probably in North America, but definitely in the United States as well. Particularly, we're in a time of change and evolution, and I think that we're all kind of racking our heads together to figure out what the heck is going on and what do we need to do in the future and what do we really need to do to change things. And I think that this is a phenomenal opportunity for young players. I mean, we see it in Pulisic and so many other players that are coming up through the ranks, and it's in the United States really specifically, we're at a time that we're growing, and I think we're looking into what we're doing and why we're doing it, and why, frankly, probably why it's not working, right? So I think that this is, I think that all these conversations we have on here, I hope in some form are digging into that. They're digging into the fact that, hey, we've got issues, we've got challenges, we've got problems, but how do we try to tackle that, right? And I think that part of that you're very much in tune with, in the fact that the last 9 seconds and players scoring goals, you're right. I mean, it's the opportunity that the crowd has to really be engaged with the game itself, right? Now, listen, whether it's looking at it on TV or whether you're a parent on the sideline or a coach on the sideline of a youth game, I think that these are all opportunities, and I think the main thing that I love about the book and the course is that you have supported all of your tactics and all of your philosophies and strategies based on probably statistics and facts that dive into the player themselves and what they're doing in that last 9 seconds, which is definitely one of the things that I think is such an intriguing standpoint. Now, I'm not talking from a goalkeeper perspective, because it's not intriguing to me from a goalkeeper perspective. But no, I'm just kidding. From an attacker standpoint, I think that this is I don't know. I mean, from a coaching standpoint, I always tell players, and I've told so many players in the past at higher levels, that soccer is made up and games are essentially determined by moments. And the many moments that we have in games determine the outcome of the game. So therefore, if that moment potentially was a few seconds or 9 seconds, or even a few minutes in the build-up play as it relates to a goal potentially, I think that those are things that we tell players all the time, that moments determine the outcomes. And I think that you dig into that when you say that basically 9 seconds and an opportunity to finish a goal and to slot it past a goalkeeper, though they might be our kind in this particular conversation, I think those are moments that define the outcomes of games.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I say 9 seconds, in some cases it's what's going on in that decision-making process in the last 3 seconds before a goal.
Right.
I found that 9 seconds is probably the most. So, for example, if it has a poor team and doesn't get any chances to score, then my book's not going to help them too much.
Right.
Because I'm working on that split second when there's a chance to score.
Right.
So I'm not, in my book, I don't talk about building a play up or how to get that chance. I'm assuming that the coaches have already figured that out, players have figured that out. But most coaches don't spend much time on that last touch that the player has to do. And they may do it at practice. And, we're all saying the same thing. We're coaching the right things. But sometimes it's a psychological thing. Because, I've seen players that can dribble like crazy and they got speed and they can shoot, both feet. They can hit a ball. They're not afraid to go challenge for the ball. And yet, they're missing scoring chances. And then you get another kid who seems a little bit klutzy or maybe doesn't have the talent, raw skills that this other kid might have. And that person seems to somehow always be in the right spot, puts the ball in the net, and ole, celebrates.
Yeah.
And I think that Gary Lineker, who I quote quite often because he's been mentioned in a number of times in the book, Gary Lineker, who I think now is a broadcaster in the UK, but he was an average player playing in the lower leagues, and he said to himself, if I'm ever going to get a chance to play, he was a striker, to play in the Premier League or the top league at the time, I got to put the ball in the net when I get a chance. So he actually started to study in his own way the things he needed to do to score. And Gary Lineker, as you probably know, if you watched him play, he wasn't the fastest player, wasn't the biggest, but he put the ball in the net. He was a leading scorer in one of the World Cups. I forget which one, 86 or 84 maybe. I don't know. One of those World Cups, he was the golden boot winner. And he always said, I was always at the right spot. Sometimes the ball didn't get there, but I was always in the right spot. So, sometimes, and he didn't have the skill of a Pele or Maradona or Messi or Ronaldo, but, so guys like him have figured it out. And then you see a player who's got much more skill and they just don't put the ball in the net. So that's what the book is about.
So Gary played with Barcelona, right? I mean, do I have that right? Wasn't it Barcelona at some point?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't know if he did.
Yeah, I think Gary played at Barcelona, and I think they won the Copa del Rey, if I'm not mistaken. This was in the late 80s. Does that sound about right?
Right. Well, I always thought he played in England, but
he was an English. He was an English player, though, right?
Yeah, I thought he played for. I can't remember who.
Was it Spurs? Was it Spurs?
Spurs, I think it was.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that rings a bell a little bit, but the name does come to mind for sure. I think that he played some time in Barcelona early on, maybe, but I think he won the Copa del Rey. But he also, I definitely do remember his name tied in with Spurs, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
I think we'll have to Google.
Yeah. There you go. Well, hey, we'll splice in the right answer. So everyone listening, we'll splice in the right answer. Yeah.
So in my studies, I was also fortunate enough to talk to some of the best strikers in the world. and a number of strikers. So I had the chance to meet Pele, who still holds the record for the most goals ever.
Yeah.
And, I talked to him about goal scoring. He's a really nice fella. I've talked to George Best, who was, the late George Best was a really good goal scorer. Alan Shearer. So I've had an opportunity to chat with some of these players to get their perspective. So I do spend a bit of time on the book with quotes from these players, but also what did they do that made them different when they were kids? What aspect of their player development, maybe set them apart? 'Cause some of these guys were obviously superstars,
Right.
Above and beyond your regular professional. So I do have a section of the book on player development, and a lot of it is, of everyone that I've talked to that's ever played professionally, if you don't love the game, if you're not looking forward to your next practice session, your next training session, maybe unless it's fitness, but anything with the ball, if you're not looking forward to that, if you walking down a park and see a soccer ball with a bunch of people, you don't want to play in that little mini game just as much as you want to play in a game with referees and everything, then you're not going to make it. I think that passion is the most important thing. You have to have it. And sometimes coaches, we overcoach, we put too much stress and pressure on players, and we're taking the passion away. And that's something that I do tackle in the book. And I really believe that if we're going to have world-class players in North America, we got to make sure we keep kids in the game because they love it, not because their parents want them to play or any other reason. They have to have passion. And I think it goes for just about anything in life, actually.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. I have so many different conversations where everything seems to be drilled back down to the fact that if kids aren't owning the creativity that we used to, I'd hate to say that it used to be standard, but it certainly used to be more common from a soccer standpoint in the United States, especially in North America too. But think about North America from a standpoint of players, especially in Central America. I don't know, so many players, some of the best, for example, some of our players have come from the streets, right? And it's just the fact that, the less structure involved right now, unfortunately, in a time that we're facing way more structure, pay to play mentality. I know that's kind of a hot topic, but I think that the more we allow players to be creative, whether it's from a structured training session that we're holding at a club where they are paying top dollar to be there, I think we have to fight that mentality where coaches are more in control and instead allow players to have a period, a time. I don't think it's the whole thing necessarily. That's probably a different conversation, but have a period of the training session where they dictate certain elements of the session themselves. But we just don't have players that are out in the streets playing anymore, right? That are creating their own game, creating their own environment. I think that that's one of the things that over the past decade, if not more, we've transitioned away from. I'm just speaking from a personal standpoint of growing up playing in the United States specifically, and club soccer was extremely different when I was going through the system, and I don't know that I could say it's a whole lot better right now and everywhere, certain places for sure, but I think that's definitely a challenge we're all facing.
Yeah, 100%. And I was just going to give you a couple examples on that. In our area here, just outside the outskirts of Toronto, there's a club that I coached in, and part of the registration fee, they give every kid a soccer ball.
Yeah.
So that was part of your fee. They all get a ball, so the coach doesn't have to worry about bringing. And this is a recreational soccer. So on beautiful Sunday or Saturday afternoon, I drive by the neighborhood, and there's lots of parks with fields and the net. And I'd say, I wonder how many kids are actually out there kicking a ball. And for the most part, the fields are empty. That's not good. When I was in Sunrise, Florida, we were taking an NSCAA, which is now United Soccer Coaches course over the course of 7 days, I guess it was. And we went to a field that had beautiful pitches. They had basketball courts in the distance. And, we had 300-400 coaches. We're all taking courses there. And I remember talking to a fellow coach and saying, you know what's missing here? We've been here a whole week, middle of the day, after school. I don't see any kids here with a soccer ball, kicking a ball at the net, playing in a little group. There was a cluster of kids playing basketball at the nearby basketball court. Nobody playing soccer, pick up on their own after school. Unless we change that, there's only so much a coach could do at a training session.
Right.
We need that player to pick a ball up and go play on their own. Because and I had one of my players that I used to coach go to Brazil and go to the Zico Academy.
Right.
And he also, so one night he sent me a picture of a local, like a high school field in Brazil. This was Rio de Janeiro.
Right.
And it must have been 200 kids on the field and adults playing mini games in different patches and corners of the field. They put a couple of gym bags down, and one corner there's 6v6, and in the center circle there's another game going for hours till it's time to go to bed. So how are we going to compete with someone who's on the ball 6 hours a day if we have players who are just training 3 times a week? Maybe.
No, I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, so I've been to Brazil, and around every corner is a futsal court or space, right? I mean, it might be a combination basketball, futsal kind of court, but the opportunity is endless, and there's kids constantly out there playing. And I mean, I remember when I went to Brazil, and this was quite some time ago. I mean, I'm talking over a decade ago. Is that all we did was play soccer the entire time. And it was never structured. It was never structured, but it was always the most fun you've ever had playing the game. And I think that, listen, as a goalkeeper, I loved playing on the field, and that was just me. I came from that, which was probably what made me a little bit of a better goalkeeper, and certainly makes me a decent coach today, as I saw more of the pitch itself from many different angles than just from standing inside the 18-yard box. But, I think that was what was the most fun, is the opportunity to play without the pressure, without the structure, but to just play the game. You got a ball, you got 2 nets, and you got some type of environment you're playing in. I mean, it was the most fun I've ever had in my life, and I remember that. I'll never forget that. And I think that I didn't know at the time that was such a precious thing, and I think that was such a valuable thing for sure.
Yeah, and I remember talking to George Best, and he'd go outside in his little, outside his home in this, it wasn't even a park, it was on concrete, and with him and his brothers, a bunch of friends, and they're playing every day. And
right.
That's what we need. So the good news is that I'm seeing more of that today than I have maybe in the last 10 or 15 years.
Right.
I know that in New York City, or from what I understand, they've built a whole host of mini fields with turf where players could just go and play. Up here in the Toronto area is a little city called Mississauga, and they did a trial last year where they put some turf in a little area and see if kids or anyone would go there and just play. And it was so successful that they've now built a second pitch, paid for by the city.
Wow.
You just go there and play. And it's, because of the turf, you're not worrying about mud or anything like that. So I am seeing a bit of a change in that. So I think things are looking up, and I think that's what we're all after, because we all love the game.
Yeah, no, I think that you're right. It's kind of spot on there. We have, especially down here just south, we're in North Carolina. We have massive turf complexes that are popping up that they tackle the challenge of maintaining field conditions, just because obviously with turf it allows a little bit more wear and tear, and I think that that's an opportunity. And I've seen, and it's this weird thing, right? That anytime we go out there, we're thinking, all right, who's going to come kick us off? And I mean, that's one of the things I remember from growing up all the time is you're getting kicked off of fields here and there because they're grass fields. And, you know, I mean, and as kids, we go find anywhere we can to play outside the backyard. So I think that this is a wonderful opportunity. And I definitely understand what you're talking about there is it's, you know, I mean, we go out all the time and we'll do training sessions kind of outside of the club scene and just on our own. And listen, we're allowed the space. And I think that, I mean, think about that. That's an hour and a half that players are gaining experience and gaining the opportunity to get better at the game. So I think if we can replicate that other places, that obviously we're pushing the needle forward. And I think that that's the challenge that we're facing. And that's the challenge we're trying to overcome from a growth standpoint in North America. And you mentioned it early on in the podcast that obviously the World Cup is coming in the future. And I mean, what a better opportunity for us to finally figure this all out and to hopefully North American country become kind of center stage at that World Cup.
Yeah, and you know, it won't surprise me that you know, if especially if we can start to turn the media,
right?
Because that's part of it. You know, what happens on television, radio, is still a big part of promoting a sport, and that's a whole different topic. But
right.
If the numbers are there, and we can and we start to get more discussions and then the kids are, you know, if they're not good enough to play pro at any time, they're going to become fans and then their kids will be fans. And I think that, and it's starting to happen already because, you know, you look at Atlanta, for example, and the attendance that they've had at their game. You know, their all-star game, what did they have, 72,000?
It was a lot, though. I don't remember the exact number, but I do remember seeing that it was quite a few.
Over 70,000.
And they came out of nowhere, to be fair. I mean, they didn't come out of nowhere, don't get me wrong, but I mean, they kind of came out of nowhere in terms of the sports world for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you're going to see, you know, kids who are at those games, they're going to want to be on that field. So, you know, you're going to see more and more kids wanting to play soccer. And I think that, I mean, U.S. women's is already at the top of the world. I think that the U.S. men, although they had a bit of an off World Cup here, they're going to be back in the picture. And, you know, if the coaches are picking the right players, it wouldn't surprise me that they'll be back in the top 8 before too long. And who knows, maybe they can pull off a World Cup. It's not easy, but I do see, in fact, you know what I've said, and I've tweeted this out. I've picked 2047 as the year where soccer will be the number 2 sport, both in Canada and the U.S. Now, I'll say behind football in the U.S. and behind hockey in Canada.
There you go.
The number 2 sport in terms of attendance, in terms of people talking about it on the radio, it'll surpass all other sports. That's just a prediction.
No, I think that's wise. I mean, I think that we're definitely both talking about the same things and seeing the fact that the sport's growing for sure. So I mean, tell us where, John, where people can learn more about The Last 9 Seconds. Obviously, we know that we can purchase it many different places, whether it's on Amazon or on your website itself. But I do want to make sure that as we kind of close down and we leave everybody with an opportunity to find out more about The Last 9 Seconds and to gain some more information.
Yeah, so I've got the website called thelast9seconds.com. I also have one, and it takes you to the same spot,
right?
Goalscoring.com, and there's another one there. I think it's called thesecretsofscoringgoals.com.
Right.
Where you start Googling, it'll pop up. So on those websites, it gives you information about some of the players who've been in my course that I designed, and where to also get the book.
Well, and I will say that it's that website that you have. I mean, I think that the biggest thing and the most supportive fact of why would anyone purchase that. I mean, it not only is it phenomenal information. I mean, you're talking some really superstars who have been through, and I mean, just the support's there. I mean, you've got all kinds of players throughout so many different leagues, specifically in the U.S. and in Canada, but have gone through the course. And I mean, they are doing exactly what the course is teaching, which is they're scoring more goals, right?
Yeah, almost immediately. Players will just all of a sudden say, maybe I missed a chance, and I remember what John mentioned, because I do talk about visualizing and remembering all the reasons why maybe they didn't score. And I hit them in a way that you almost can't ever forget my course. So I'm open to have my course come to communities across the world. So if someone wants to bring me in for a weekend, which is usually what I do, it's usually 3 days. Sometimes it's 4, depending on the facilities and the hosts. I'd be excited to bring my course, anywhere. Players have improved quite rapidly, and sometimes a couple of things. It is meant for 14-year-olds and up. Anything younger than that's not quite ready for the psychological portion of the course, which is pretty much the whole course. Maybe a U13 girl. Girls tend to be a little bit more, advanced, I guess, at that age. Right. So a U13 girl, U14 boys, and up is where you have most success. And sometimes, for if players are listening, quite often, you score a goal at the right time. It can, be the difference between getting to a semifinal and then to a final, and getting seen by scouts at, say, at a combine or at a showcase tournament. That one extra goal can be a huge difference. So, if you're scoring even, 5 goals a year, and the course helps you score 6, you've improved your output by 20%.
Yeah.
Most players are getting a lot more than that, but that extra goal at the right time could be a difference. And like I tell players, it's very difficult. And I do mention this in the book. I remember a player who I was scouting. I was coaching an all-star team for a league, and I had to go pick players real quickly. And then we went and played against universities in the U.S. plus the Dallas Cup. This was way back. And I remember going to a game and scouting a number of players from this team, but there's this one player who just kept missing what looked like sitters. And so I didn't pick him. Coach called me back, said, John, he had a bad day, that poor kid, and give him a chance. So I had him back in the team. And he made the team, and he was my top scorer, and he's probably made the most money at soccer because he played in the old MISL indoor league. Do you know the Florio was his name?
Yeah. I mean, I'm vaguely familiar, but I do know what you're talking about.
He came, I think he's 5th overall in the history of indoor soccer. So he made a career of himself, but that could have been missed hadn't it been for the coach. So scoring a goal when somebody's watching just at the right time could be the difference between making it and not making it. And, the one thing about a player who's scoring consistently, that coach can't ignore him. Maybe he's not pretty, maybe he's not a dribbler or speedster, but if that ball goes in the net, you have to look at him. Everybody's looking for that goal scorer. So sometimes that few extra goals can change your career, and that's what I hope to do with the course.
No, I think that's a wonderful thing to kind of close out on. Is it's the and I wanted to make sure you did kind of add that, which is, listen, there are certain things that you are doing and you are coaching and telling people that you don't need to wait for a whole season to find the impact of that. I think that's the wonderful opportunity that you offer in your approach of the last 9 seconds and the training that's related to that, which is almost an immediate impact, and it offers players, coaches, anyone in attendance the opportunity to assess where they are and to make those certain changes. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And I couldn't support any more than obviously just encouraging people to go check it out more. And if you have questions, reach out to John and ask him, because listen, it's backed by stats, data, and almost even science. And I don't think that there's no room for opinion, which we find a lot in this game, but I think that this is backed by years and years of implementation and feedback and results more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Thanks very much, Tyler, for having me.
Yeah, no, John, this has been a wonderful opportunity, and I know we've touched on so many different things, but I think that if anybody has any further questions about all the great stuff you've got going on, obviously they know to check you out online and to reach out. They can reach out to us via the podcast, and we can connect everyone. But yeah, I mean, I think this has been a wonderful insight, and I'm grateful and humbled to have you on, and I think that all the listeners hopefully gain something. I know they have for sure. They've gained something from this particular episode, and we're looking forward to hopefully having you on in the future.
Yeah, love to.
Awesome. Well, this has been another episode of Between the Post with guest John DeBenedictus, and we nailed the name again, so that's how we know things are going right. But if you want to look into everything John's got going on, obviously he's got a lot of different opportunities to get a hold of him at the last 9 seconds, or even golden goal scoring. You can check those out. Just Google anything, even John DeBenedictus name, he comes up. I've done the same, and he's pretty easily accessible, and he's out there and available, and definitely an extremely intelligent soccer IQ, soccer mind out there. And we are very humbled to have him on the show and looking forward to another opportunity to speak with him. Definitely check him out. Check out all the different opportunities to get a hold of John in the show notes if you're still listening, and we're looking forward to hopefully getting more goals in the back of the net through a wonderful episode with John. We thank you. We'll look forward to speaking with you next week on Between the Post.